UFC Fight Night 107, Saturday, March 18th, over in London, England, at the O2 Arena, as over 15,000 people were in attendance for the event. They're exclusively shown on the UFC Fight Pass. Altogether, there was 13 fights on the card, 4 of which were on the main card. Before I get to my complete breakdown of the main card fights, where I did go 2-2 in my main card fight picks, looking over the undercard, some really good performances and some good fights overall. I think a fight that really surprised me was Lena Landsberg against Lucy Podolova, if I said that correctly. First fight of the night in the women's bantamweight division. Landsberg, of course, making her second appearance in the UFC after her first appearance was a loss to Cyborg Santos. No shame in that. And this was Podova's UFC debut. These two went at it. Really good fight. Ended up being a unanimous decision victory for Lena Landsberg. A little surprising, looking at the total stats, as Podolova ended up landing 163 strikes to just 96 for Landsberg, and she threw an incredible 277 strikes. Really good clip there. Landsberg landed 96 total strikes out of 162 thrown, was only successful on one takedown. That came in the second round. Otherwise, really got shut down. A lot of this fight was in close in the clinch. When it was at range, Podolova was definitely the better striker of the two. And this fight, to me, was the first round probably for Landsberg. She really, I thought, controlled the fight up against the cage, did land some solid combinations of her own. And round two, I think Podolova started to take over a little bit. You saw her up the intensity. Striking numbers were close again. Landsberg did have a takedown, but I didn't think she did much with it. And then around three, I thought that was all Podolova. I think she was really starting to put it on. I mean, the striking numbers back that up as she outstruck Landsberg 86-30, shut her down on 3 takedown attempts, and I thought really took that round over. To me, that round was clearly hers. The first two, I thought Podolova did enough to take one of those 2 rounds, possibly both, depending on how you scored this fight. And the third round, some people thought maybe a 10-8. I didn't think it was a 10-8, but I could see how one could score it that way. A little surprised to see all 3 judges score it 29-28 in favor of Landsberg. I was really surprised that all 3 gave Landsberg 2 rounds. I thought Landsberg definitely won a round in this fight, but a little surprised to see her take 3, especially when you look at her face after the fight. I know you're not supposed to judge in the way, some people's take the damage differently, but her face was definitely beat up in that one, and Landsberg definitely proved she's a tough individual, because I mean, even though she got beat by Cyborg easily, but who hasn't? But for Podolova to come in her debut to take on somebody who at least had fought in the UFC before, and especially against a very difficult opponent and in the main event, I think she performed pretty well, and I think Podolova definitely has a future. We'll have to work on separating quicker, because I think that being up against the cage a lot, octagon control is a judging and scoring criteria, and I think the judges maybe leaned a little too heavily on this, because Podolova definitely put way more damage in this fight, and like I said, landed about 70 more strikes. I think that's a big difference, and I think she probably should have won the fight. Anyways, some other great fights. Really good fight between Bradley Scott and Scott Askham. This one was really close, and this one was a split decision, but I think those leg kicks that Scott was landing on Askham, that you could tell was really affecting, really hampered his movement, had to switch his stance at one time. I think that was really weighing heavily with the judges, though Askham did outstrike Scott 86-74, was a little more active, 195 thrown to 177 for Scott. Did land the only takedown that was successful in the fight, but most of this fight was stayed standing. But I think those leg kicks, and with good reasons, I mean, they were the most significant strikes of the fight, and I think Scott also did, they're both Scott, Bradley Scott, I should say, did drop Scott Askham. That was another thing, too, and you could see why the judges gave him the fight despite the slight striking disparity. That one was a really good scrap. And then, what a performance, just 30 seconds making his UFC debut. Mark Diakazi, boy, he threw I'm going to talk some Glory here because Glory 39 is coming up, but those of you who know me, I've interviewed him on the show a couple times. Raymond Daniels, former Glory fighter, now Bellator kickboxer. For those of you who know, he pulled off the double tap 360 or tornado kick, however you want to say that, knocking out, let's see, who am I thinking of? The guy from France. I can't think of his name at this current moment. Francis Ambang. Now, he threw that kick against Timo Packalin. It didn't land, but he threw it like perfect technique. And then a few seconds later, saw an opportunity, perfect counter right, knocked him out cold, and that's all Mark needed to win his UFC debut. Lightning quick, just 30 seconds. Definitely worthy of a performance of the night bonus. And if you haven't seen that one, go back and Fight Pass and watch it. All 30 seconds. So you can probably watch it 5 times. It was pretty awesome. Then I thought a very good performance by Leon Edwards taking out Vincente Luque, who I'm a really big fan of Luque, was of his going back to his time on the Ultimate Fighter Season 21. I thought Leon Edwards made Luque look pretty bad. He outstruck Luque 77-44. Luque only threw 64 strikes. That's just not going to get it done. Luque then tried to out-grapple Edwards. Didn't really work, only 2 of 7 on takedowns, and both those takedowns landed in the first round. That's probably the only round you could really give Luque, and I thought rounds 2 and 3, Edwards figured out the game plan, and he started to press the issue with the takedown as well, which you haven't seen Leon Edwards do that in much of his UFC fights. He actually attempted 12 takedowns, 3 of which landed, 2 in the second, 1 in the third, and I think that reversal of roles with trying to take him down, and obviously Luque feeling pressed to try to take Edwards down, knowing that the stand-up wasn't going his way, equal to a really poor performance by Luque and a very strong performance by Edwards, who just really took things over after that first round, outstriking Luque 23-1 in round 2, and then 43-16 in round 3. Again, landing 3 takedowns in those 2 rounds to me really take over and have I think his best overall in terms of what he showed in a skill set, not just being a solid striker, but showing a good grappling game. And then obviously I think his best win in terms of quality opponent. This was a really nice win for Leon Edwards. Tim Johnson just gets by Daniel Olmachuk. Francis Barhoz was able to get by Darren Stewart. And Joe Duffy put on a very one-sided but fantastic performance defeating Reza Madadi. I believe this is Duffy's last fight on his current contract. It'll be interesting to see whether the UFC keeps him around or if he goes somewhere else, like a Bellator World Series of Fighting or Risen. Looking at the 4 main card fights kicked off in the featherweight division as Arnold Allen took on Makwan Amirkhani. These two have both not fought since the last UFC in London, which was about a year ago. Both young guns in the featherweight division. Amirkhani 3-0 in the UFC, Allen 2-0. If you go back to my breakdown last week, I wasn't sure if Allen could really deal with the grappling prowess of Amirkhani, but boy, did he surprise me. He was able to stick with Amirkhani from start to finish. Not only that, I think he was the better conditioned fighter. Maybe he was a slightly bigger, slightly stronger, and obviously the better striker of the two. But the fact that he was able to keep up with Amirkhani, not get himself into really that many bad positions, was able to reverse him a lot of cases. This had a lot of reversals by both guys. A really fantastic fight, especially when you add in the grappling end. When it came to striking, Allen did outstrike Amirkhani 75-32 in terms of landed strikes. He threw 118, that did Allen, and just 65 for Amirkhani. Amirkhani successful on 4 of 12 takedown, 3 of 6 for Allen. Many reversals kind of back through fourth. I thought Allen... boy, this was a close fight. I think Amirkhani probably took the first round, even though he got outstruck 23-8. He did land 2 takedowns. Round 2, Amirkhani landed a takedown, but did get outstruck 36-10. I think that's when you start to see the striking disparity. And then round 3 was really close. There was that's the round where there was quite a few reversals. Both landed a takedown. Amirkhani just 1 for 7 in takedowns. Allen 2 for 4. Allen with a slight striking edge, 16-4. However, I think he was getting a little better of those grappling exchanges. I think may have just eked out the third round, though again, I wouldn't have been surprised had the judges went for Amirkhani. Again, a split decision, but the very big victory for Allen. Similar to Leon Edwards before, this was a guy who, hadn't really been tested yet too much in the UFC, a guy that was relatively unknown, and taking on a guy like Amirkhani, both guys very young. I mean, they'll probably meet sometime in the future in this 45 division, but this was a big win for Arnold Allen. Definitely proves that he is worthy of being a top prospect in his division, and I look forward to seeing him continue his career because being able to take a guy out like that on a year layoff, whether there was injury or not, I think is a big deal. I'm looking forward to see Arnold Allen here in the future. Marlon Vera against Brad Pickett. Marlon Vera did miss weight, so this technically was a catch weight. Of course, Vera is a guy who's fought some of his career at 145 pounds, trying to drop down to bantamweight here. And you could really see the size difference in this fight between the two. And early on, I think Pickett was definitely winning this fight. You could see the speed difference between the two, but I think Vera started to see and feel out that speed a little more, started to kind of press the issue. I think Pickett probably took round one. Round one was pretty close. I probably would have gave Vera, I should say. And then round two was definitely Pickett. The striking numbers back me up in that. Vera outstriking Pickett 24-17 in round one. Pickett outstriking Vera 30-17. And so heading into round three, I definitely thought Pickett had the momentum. But towards the end of round two, Vera, I thought, started to, like I said, adjust that speed, realize that he can kind of use his size a little bit, even though he's not a grappling guy. And I thought really start to pick it up a little bit. And I think Pickett, throwing a lot of hard shots against a bigger guy, they weren't landing. I think he was starting to kind of slow down a little bit. That was the match the speed of Vera. Vera started to take over and then landed that beautiful head kick that just dropped Pickett out cold. You could see he was trying to dispute it then, but as soon as he popped up, you could see him wobble for a few seconds. Definitely a good stoppage by the referee, Grant Waterman, and nice performance by Vera. As we all know, this was Pickett's last fight ever in the world of mixed martial arts, and he put on a great effort. It was just simply Vera was a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, obviously a little bit younger. Not to say Pickett didn't have a chance to win this fight, but you could see why he was contemplating retirement, and getting knocked out is never a good thing, and he definitely had a great career. I mean, I know going 5-10 in the UFC doesn't seem that great, but he stood in the top of the bantamweight division for many, many years, really up about until the last two. He did have that dip down in flyweight, but this is a fight for Vera. If he can learn how to make weight, he can definitely be a contender here in this bantamweight division. He does have decent submission, good stand-up. Really the thing he's got to work on a little bit is being able to get back up quicker if he does get taken down, and obviously maybe a little more head movement. And I think he could throw things with a little less power all the time. Maybe set things up a little more. But maybe that's a little nitpicking. But overall, pretty good performance by Marlon Vera against a guy who really wanted to win, and the crowd really wanted to win in Brad Pickett. Gunnar Nelson against Alan Joubert. Fight pretty much went the way I thought it would. Obviously, with the first round, Gunnar getting the takedown, was able to pretty much dominate and hold that position. Now, I expected Gunnar to win. Obviously, I picked him to win the fight. But the way he set up the submission, I didn't think he would set up through striking. I thought he would set up by takedown, passing, and whatnot. But then round two was able to land a very nice striking combination. Dropped Joubert. Gunnar Nelson took it from there and got the guillotine choke to get the tap there in the second round, just 46 seconds. And really, that's the thing. Even though Joubert is a good striker, Nelson's a solid striker in his own right and a very good jiu-jitsu black belt. So he has something to fall back on. Joubert doesn't have that. So if it wasn't going his way in the stand-up, Joubert really had no options. So this fight was really Gunnar Nelson would have to do something stupid or get caught to lose, and Gunnar Nelson was the one that caught. Joubert gets a big win. His coach afterward, John Kavanaugh, called out Stephen Thompson. I think that's a perfect fight. Gunnar Nelson was ranked number 9 coming into this fight. Obviously, both have a very similar style with that wide karate stance. You add in the grappling and jiu-jitsu game of Gunnar Nelson. Obviously, Thompson's trying to look back to get into title contention after another close fight, this time an actual loss against Tyron Woodley. I think this is a perfect fight to make, and hopefully maybe sometime this summer we can see that fight at some point. And I think that would be a really excellent fight between those two. Main event of the evening, just as I said in the breakdown, I think Jimmy Manuwa had to get this fight in the first round. If he didn't, I think it was going to be a hard time trying to stop the takedowns of Corey Anderson for 25 minutes. He did stop all 3 attempts that were coming his way in the first round, then was able to land a perfect left hand that just shut the lights out of Corey Anderson, and incredible. And that's what Jimmy Manuwa needed to do. He needed to get that punch in the first round, got himself a nice performance bonus, and Jimmy Manuwa, who is ranked number 4 in this fight, is not going to really move up the rankings. He's not going to pass Gustafsson or Rumble Johnson, and I believe the other guy is Glover. I don't think he was going to pass those 3. However, with him winning and Shogun winning a few weeks ago, and I think Shogun was ranked... I think Shogun now moves up to 5 or 6 or something like that. So I think that's the perfect fight to make Jimmy Manuwa against Shogun Rua, not just rankings-wise, but excitement-wise. I mean, you have 2 of the best knockout artists as any division in terms of percentage. Obviously, Shogun Rua has like 20 knockout wins out of 25 victories or something like that, and Jimmy Manuwa has a ridiculous knockout to win ratio as well. So I really think that's the fight to make. However, Shogun did have a pretty good war there with Gian Villante, so that's the only thing that could perhaps keep that later, but that's definitely a good fight to make, and I think that's the fight to make coming up next, Jimmy Manuwa against Shogun Rua, not just because of rankings, but I think that just would be an incredible, great fight. Perfect fight night main event or a great co-main event for even like a bigger Fox card or something like that. I think that's a perfect fight to might. So again, went 2-2 in picks and really enjoyed UFC Fight Night London, UFC Fight Night 107. So if you missed any of those fights or just watched the main card or undercard, got Fight Pass, go on and check it out. It definitely was a really solid night over there in the UK. Looking at what else happened in the world of mixed martial arts to kind of end the show here. World Series of Fighting 35 happened. Blagi Ivanov with a very dominant win over Sean Jordan, knocking out the former UFC product in the first round. Blaganov is a guy who fought back in the MFC, which, of course, as many of you fans may remember if you've been watching the show for a while. I interviewed the president from the MFC, Mark Pavlich, a few times on this program. I also interviewed a couple of their top contenders and guys who obviously were in the Ultimate Fighter, like Tom Galicchio. Obviously started interviewing Sam Alvey back in his MFC days, and a couple other fighters that have made their way through at the time Canada's top promotion before they closed their doors. But Ivanov continues to roll, and that's probably the biggest victory to date for Ivanov, knocking out someone like Sean Jordan. Also, Andre Harrison with a huge upset victory over Lance Palmer, beating him unanimously after all 5 rounds. Huge win there. Bleklak Magomedov, I believe that was for he's their flyweight champion. He defeated Donovan Frilo. That was also via unanimous decision. The other guy from Dagestan, Akbubar Nurmagomedov, was able to defeat former Ultimate Fighter contestant Matt Secor. And then former featherweight champion Alexandre Ferreira, if I said that correctly, he actually lost a split decision. So the featherweight division, very interesting. It'll be interesting whether Palmer gets the rematch or the guy that beat Alexandre, their former featherweight champion, if he moves up and fights for the championship next. So that'll be really interesting to see there for World Series of Fighting, who, at least according to Sheerdog, does not have their next event planned. So I don't know when World Series of Fighting 36 will be, but as far as I know, it has not been announced, which is kind of interesting that they don't have something on the books or even in the works. Also, Hakeem Dawadu, if I said that correctly, he defeated former UFC fighter Steven Seiler. So also a big win for him in this fight. Steven Rodriguez is the gentleman that beat Alexandre Almeida, not Ferreira. But Alexandre did lose a split decision, so possibly this Steven Rodriguez could be fighting Andre Harrison for the featherweight title. I don't know, we'll see. The fact that they don't have their next event booked and it shows nothing on Sheerdog makes me a little weary. So, I don't know, we'll see. Very interesting. Speaking of what's coming up this weekend, Glory 39 will be shown on the UFC Fight Pass as well as ESPN. Awesome card they're bringing to Brussels in Belgium. Looking at the Super Fight Series, that's on the UFC Fight Pass. The big 2 fights, good friend of the show, and look forward to having him back on. Chai Lewis Perry will return to action. He takes on longtime top heavyweight Hedzi Girgis. Huge fight for Chai. If he can beat a guy the caliber of Hedzi Girgis, that really does a lot for him in the very crowded heavyweight division. And then also Gregorian, who just lost the shot he got for the lightweight title. He'll be returning to action against Bulgarian native Petrov, making his Glory debut, just 10-6 overall. No offense to Petrov, but it's kind of a tune-up fight for Gregorian, in my opinion. And then, of course, speaking of the lightweight title, Sidichai will take on Dylan Salvador, who made his a Glory debut in, I think that was Glory, was that 37? And shocked everybody. He was a late replacement for their lightweight tournament, was able to win both fights over, in my opinion, the tournament favorite there in Anatoly Moziev, and then defeated Hinsy Barik in the main event. That was at Glory 36 via unanimous decision. So the Frenchman, with a overall record of 49-11 to just one draw, taking on the Thai champion here in Sidichai, who's been nothing but fantastic so far in Glory. The only loss coming to Robin van Roosmalen, which he avenged back at Glory 31. Even though it was a split decision win over Gregorian, I really thought he dominated that fight. I think that was interesting. And Salvador, I don't know. He had a very impressive tournament run, but this Sidichai, man, he's so technically sound, and especially he's so conditioned to go the 5 rounds, even though Salvador performed admirably fighting all 6 rounds there of the tournament. He's going to have his hands full. I'm not sure if he's quite ready for a guy the caliber of Sidichai. It should be fun to watch. Obviously, I really love Sidichai. I think he's maybe the most technical fighter Glory has, especially of their champion. So I think this should be interesting. Salvador definitely has his work cut out for him, but I think Sidichai gets this defense. I think hopefully this year, I know Van Roosmalen missed weight for the 45 title. That could see him make a comeback to 55. I still think we got a great trilogy in the works if and when Van Roosmalen decides to jump back up to lightweight. But Salvador's going to have his work cut out for him, definitely sure, but I'm going to be excited for that. Heading to the main card on ESPN, speaking of the featherweight division, featherweight tournament, former featherweight champion Sergey Adamchuk, he'll be taking on a Glory newcomer from Belgium, overall 17-4, and he's going to take, his name is Nafi Balalovsky, if I said that correctly. He's making his Glory debut. You got your work cut out for him, taking on one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in Sergey Adamchuk. And then Kia Kumkao, I said that probably completely wrong, out of Thailand. It's spelled Kiatmookao. I'll have to wait till Todd Grisham and Joseph Altolini give the pronunciation, but this guy has a incredible record. Yeah, 154-35 with 2 draws for the man from Thailand. He'll be making his second fight in Glory. He made his Glory debut back at Glory 35, taking out Stanislav Renata via unanimous decision. So he will be taking on another Glory newcomer, a Russian native with an overall record of 21-2 with 1 draw, Alexei Ulanov. So this should be, I'm not really sure who's going to come out of that. Obviously, I think the winner fights Adamchuk, and good luck doing that. But really, this tournament, to me, is really set up for Adamchuk to win and get another shot at the featherweight championship, however that situation is going to play itself out. Again, with Van Roosmalen missing weight, he technically kind of got like stripped of the title, fought Matt Embry, defeated Matt Embry, but does he still want to fight at 145? If he does, the fight will be technically for the championship. It won't be a defense. So I don't know. We'll see how that situation plays itself out, but I think this is really set up well for Adamchuk to try to get the title back. Co-main event, Gito Inosanch against Ben Sadek. Really should be an interesting fight. Ben Sadek had a awesome and upset performance in his last fight on the Badr Rico card this December as he took out Ismail Lant to run his Glory winning streak to 4 in a row via unanimous decision. It was his first fight in Glory that wasn't a knockout, though. He did knock out Anderson Silva back at Glory 23. Really good performance, runs his Glory record to 6-4, 31-5 overall. And I think Gito Inosanch, a guy that is a little bit of a smaller heavyweight, I don't know, he's going to have his work cut out for him. Obviously, he had a very ended up going to a bonus round against a guy I would consider not towards the top of the list there in D'Angelo Marshall. I think one of the reasons is because of the smaller ring they used there at Glory 37 in LA. Didn't allow Inosanch to create a lot of space to use a lot of his spinning attacks. This is coming off, again, a very close but still a victory over Hedzi Gergis back at Glory 33. So this is a very tough test here for Inosanch. If he can beat Ben Sadek, I definitely think he proves that even though he's undersized, that he's for real. But if Ben Sadek rattles off a win over Inosanch and Ismail Lant, 2 top 10s back-to-back, Ben Sadek puts himself in a very good position to fight for the heavyweight championship as well. I know Lant did win a tournament. Obviously, you have Ajibuji out there who won a tournament as well. He's been doing training with Rico, so I don't know how quickly he wants to get in there against Rico. And, of course, he's already lost to Rico once. And then, of course, the winner of Gerges and Chai Lewis Perry is right there as well. So a lot of interesting things in this heavyweight division. Really excited for this fight. I think you really have the straightforward, power boxing of Inosanch against the very creative and spinning kicks and attacks there of the Brazilian and Guto Inosanch. So really excited. That should be a very good co-main event. And the main event of the evening for the welterweight title, Cedric Doumbé against Johan Congolo. Congolo, again, he has a win over the champion, Cedric Doumbé. That was back at Glory 22. After that victory, he's fought some of the who's who in this division, such as Kareem Gaji, Nicky Holtzkin, Murtho Gronhart. Most recently, Johan Congolo competed in a welterweight tournament, and really I thought it looked really good and breezed through it as he was able to take out Konstantin Kunzin via unanimous decision and then put a whoop in there on Kareem Benman-Senor in the final by knockout, getting another shot at the welterweight championship after fighting for the championship last year about this time at Glory 29 against Nicky Holtzkin, which again was a very close fight. He went toe-to-toe with Nicky, and I think it's going to be a close fight again. Doumbé really did everything correctly against Nicky Holtzkin. I don't think I've seen anybody fight that good against Nicky Holtzkin. Nicky Holtzkin is either just a step ahead them or just completely dominates them. And for Doumbé to, in my opinion, really take Holtzkin out of his game is one of the more impressive performances I've seen since I started watching Glory about 2 years ago. So does Doumbé have a letdown from that, though? It'll be interesting to see. And does, having that loss against Congolo, does that maybe give him a weird sort of chip, or does that put him on, maybe he'll force things a little more? But I don't know. If I had to pick, I actually do favor Congolo. I really liked his performance in the tournament. Despite Doumbé beating Nicky Holtzkin, I really think Congolo's got to feel good psychologically coming into this fight with the tournament victory, his performance against Holtzkin, and having already beaten Doumbé. I think as far as a challenger goes, it's about as best place as you could be for a challenger. And let's not forget, this is only Doumbé's 4th fight in Glory, and he's now the main event. We'll see if there's a little bit letdown, or if that was, again, the real Cedric Doumbé we saw against Nicky Holtzkin, because up until that fight against Holtzkin, I thought his 2 fights were rather inconsistent in Glory. So we'll see what Cedric Doumbé shows up on Friday night over in Brussels, and I'm really looking forward to it. To end the show, Bellator making big news. They don't have their next event until the 31st, but they just announced that they're, 1, not only holding an event at Madison Square Garden, 2, it's going to be their 2nd attempt at a pay-per-view, and 3, they booked 2 huge fights. First of all, the grudge match that started in the Ultimate Fighting Championship when these two coached against each other on the Ultimate Fighter Brazil. That fight never materialized due to Vanderlei not wanting the fight, then Vanderlei popping for a banned substance by Nevada, and I think Charles Sullivan subsequently popped as well, so that fight never got booked. Vanderlei kind of semi-retired, Chal kind of semi-retired. Now they're back. They can fight in the U.S. again, and here we go. Vanderlei Silva against Chael Sonnen will happen. Madison Square Garden, June 24th. It's going to be Bellator 180 on pay-per-view, coupled by Fedor Emelianenko. His Bellator debut was set for earlier this year, got scrapped due to a late illness by Matt Mitrione. Mitrione now feels good to go, so that fight has been rebooked, so we're going to see Fedor hopefully take on Matt Mitrione. More fights, I'm assuming, to follow, probably a Bellator championship or 2, and probably some other big names as well. I think Douglas Lima's a guy that I don't think is booked, probably should be fighting this card. I believe their bantamweight championship is coming up. Could see a featherweight championship sneak in there as well, so maybe even I'm trying to think of the lightweight championship. I could see Michael Chandler. That could be a very real possibility. Michael Chandler. Boy, it's hard to say because Josh Thompson lost to Pitbull. Chandler obviously beat Pitbull to become the champion once again when Will Brooks left. Very close fight with Ben Henderson. could be a possibility that they do a rematch of Michael Chandler and Ben Henderson to put on this card. Not sure. Possibly Douglas Lima could be featured on this card as well, defending his championship. We'll see, though. A lot of options Bellator has to throw some other big name fights there as well. But really excited. The pay-per-view aspect, no pricing has been made. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, I don't think they can charge 60 for it," and I don't think Bellator, one, should charge 60 for it, and two, I don't think was ever going to charge 60 for it. I'm thinking probably more around the $30 range, and I think that's good, and I think that will get them definitely quite a few buys, and they'll probably show the undercard on Spike TV before. I think that's cool. So I think this is a great idea to do a pay-per-view. If they do these big tentpole events, why not try it out? And I think with these, well, no offense to Matt Ricciano, but 3 stars like that, I think that's worthwhile just on those two. Again, if they add in a title fight or two and some other big names, I think it's worth being a pay-per-view, and I'm excited. I think Bellator should at least try it. Obviously, the UFC is trying to do less pay-per-views. Bellator trying to get into the pay-per-view game, first under Scott Coker. Coker never attempted it, as far as I remember, as part of Strikeforce. So, be interested to see how it works out for Bellator, and obviously it's going to be a gauge as to whether or not they can do more in the future. But Bellator did two a year. I think that's fine. I mean, they're showing everything else on Spike. Cool, but it'll definitely help them on. Now, what they still got to develop is some younger stars, because obviously a lot of these guys are very old. They're not going to be around for much longer. Again, capitalize while you can. But that's one thing. If Bellator really wants to make a future in pay-per-view, they got to start to build up their own stars. They can't just rely on old, aging MMA stars to bring them all the rings, because eventually all those guys are going to retire. There ain't going to be anybody left, and they're going to be left with their current roster. And they're like, oh, what do we do now? So that's the only thing about it for the future. Short term, great, but they still got to help figure out a long-term plan to really compete with the UFC, in my opinion. So excited for Bellator 180. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Beyond the Cage. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham, Instagram at TheJimGraham, and of course, check out Beyond the Cage on Facebook. Like the page at facebook.com/Beyond the Cage Podcast. I'd like to thank all the people that support Beyond the Cage each and every week. TopRatedMMA.com, as well as Sports Talk 313. We also got MMA Fight Club on Facebook, Flying Brian J, Izzy Garcia on Twitter, MMA Fight Fans on Twitter. The MMA community always supporting on Beyond the Cage. Go sign up and chat with fellow fight fans on the forums, the MMAcommunity.com. Also, check out the top place in the world to get MMA memorabilia, MMAsignatures.co. Once again, I am Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of Beyond the Cage.